Although one thing that I'll bring up with this, and then we'll move straight on to the next one, is you're a big proponent of a lot of the Klingon designs being Romulan and having that link. We see this D4 being very much the Star Trek 6 Katinga Grey, although it's been pointed out to me that actually they're sort of they're not this dark grey, they're more of a greeny, I believe, and so that's why they're having the green makes more sense. But then stylistically, there's such a different feel because of Vorcha's green, but then
See, the fact you brought up the Romulan, I wasn't going to say anything, but looking at this picture, one of the first things I thought was that the D4 is clearly Klingon design, but the D5 looks influenced heavily by Romulan tech. I mean, even the wing pattern on those wings, they look almost like feathers. And the different color, the different shapes, a little more sleek. Look at those nacelles; they look like the Enterprise Romulan bird of prey nacelles, even. So it's almost like this is when they kind of acquired some Romulan tech and tried to incorporate it. So maybe that explains this a little bit. I don't know. I wasn't going to say anything, but you brought it up.
Hey, I like bringing controversy. So if we skip to the next picture then, which is a great little scale chart that I did, shows the entire Enterprise era fleet plus the D4, and stylistically, pretty interesting. I mean, this is sort of the gambit. You've got the Raptor Scout, the Bird of Prey Scout / attack ship, D5 battle cruiser, and then D4 battle cruiser. Stylistically, very everywhere.
Yes, and those last three, as I was just saying, they kind of stray away from what I consider a Klingon aesthetic and go more towards a combined Klingon-Romulan look. So that's interesting. I didn't know there would be such a size difference between all these.
Well, I always surprised me that the Bird of Prey is so big compared to the D5. I mean, that's not the size. I know John wanted it to be smaller, but that's the size they finally came up with. And so you look at that compared to the battle cruiser, the D4. It's like, oh, basically it's a not a Burrell, it's a cavort, but a small cavort, I guess.
Well, my question is, how big is the D4 compared to Enterprise? Because that might put this more in perspective for me, anyway. And that just happens to be the next picture.
Like I planned that to have. Yeah.
Okay, so they tried to make the D4 basically, the exact competitor to the NX size-wise, which makes sense. But you got these other ones, like, why'd they scale down for the D5? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, the D4, the Klingon designs have always been smaller than the Enterprise, the Starfleet designs, because having the secondary hull and then having the nacelles, I mean, push it all the way out. Whereas, the D line obviously has the neck, but it's like there's a bit and a bit and then a bit. I would love to have seen the D4 because that as a competitor flying right by would just be such a sexy thing to do. And I think if we do the third episode on the ship at some point and get John and get probably Rob to help develop some more ideas for it, that would look great. I think very much the Star Trek 6 CG, or models them together, and it's like Kronos 1 and I think this does show that the very first concept they had for the Enterprise Klingon designs was let's make it what we know, and then John really pushed away from that into a much sleeker look, which then evolved back into the look we had. And I think if the D4 had probably come out first, they might have stayed closer. Although I do like the differentiation because you shouldn't have, look at one of the first cars to now. I mean, it's not even really a comparison. So stylistically, even though it's got four wheels, things change. So having the D4 be that similar to the D7 to the Katinga, and that's 120 years or whatever of different, shouldn't be that similar. So I like the fact the D5 comes in, but yeah.
Well, it could be too that the D4. They tried the D4 and then they thought, okay, well, let's try some new stuff. Let's kind of rethink our design philosophy. Went into it and they didn't prove as successful as they had hoped, or there were flaws. So they went back to the D6 and D7. Let's make them more in line with what we had. That kind of makes sense, like an experimental period. for them,
Mhm.
and maybe they just weren't. They just didn't stand up to what they expected them to be. So
I
it's a
think
possibility.
one interesting thing is the D6 as a missing link there, because obviously with the Axonar one, that's again a very much fan. Well, it makes a lot of sense. It does show there's the immediate jump back to the no D7 look. But if the D6 actually looks closer to the D5, maybe bigger, then it's like saying, okay, maybe the D4 was the oldest ship by, it was there for 50 years. Then the D7 comes in, it's relatively new in Enterprise, lasts another, 30, 40 years, and the D6. So, if it was like a 70-year gap between D4 and Katinga, D7, sorry, I mean, that's a large gap. You can see them saying, hey, we did this design back in, the Mukhleth era, but now we've got bigger components. We can take a classic and really reinvent it. I mean, how many times do you... I mean, let's take a stupid example, but video games now, they're remastering Xbox 360 games to Xbox One. I mean, people love the classics.
Mm. Well, it also speaks to the treaty with the Romulans again during that time period. It could be that there was an exchange of technology and a different design approach, influenced by the other technology. We know that the Romulans end up getting D7s eventually. So that kind of throws my theory out the window a little bit. But
I mean, it's stylistically interesting.
It would have been cool if the Romulans had the D4 in the Enterprise incident. Then it would all make sense. That's when the technology exchange happened. They took the D4s.
Yeah, but then there'd be very, very old ships. Or even if they're D5s, that'd make even more sense. D5s, but with a big bird on the bottom. So I'm saying because that would make more sense. Like maybe they joint built the D5s with the Klingons.
Yeah.
Anyway, the next picture though is a fun one because this is the D4 model with the actual Katinga model that was used in the show. So this is what could have been and what was. Direct comparison. You can't get any more canonical than that. And this is a DS9 Katinga, and while I know it's not as accurate as other Katinga models and later used ones, it is slightly flawed. Still looks great, I think, for just the general observer. But this is again, this is what now these are not to scale. I did modify the scale slightly to make it more.
I was just going to ask that. I wanted to know if they were to scale.
Yeah, no, I think the Katinga was quite a bit smaller. It was just about 20% smaller than that, 10% smaller. But what do you think?
More than the...
Yes, maybe. I can't remember. Sorry about that. I think it was smaller. It wasn't bigger, from what I remember. Anyway, but what do you think stylistically now? You literally put them side by side. What do you think?
I think it's a stretch to say that one's a D4 and one's a D7 because
all
the iterations, all the iterations in between would have very minimalistic changes to get to see that evolution. I know we've just seen all the Enterprise ships that are totally different design that kind of fit in there. But I mean, without knowing any of that, those ships existed, and to see these and say one's a D4, one's a it's a thing about a D7, I'd be like, so the Klingons don't like changing things, and we've actually said that in previous episodes about the Klingons. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. They keep their stuff around for a long time. It works, they go with it. But I don't know. Then it's just Enterprise getting in there and screwing everything up again by just adding all that stuff in the middle. It just doesn't make sense.
But again, this is not a canon ship, so this is not
what
happened. But I think, put them side by side, you can see the subtlety of the Katinga. You can see the nice smooth lines. You can see the hull detail. You can see the more advanced feeling engines. You can feel the smaller engines. Everything is smaller, smoother, more detailed. I think I hadn't really thought of them as much as I do now, but really you can see this D4 is a big, rough, raw, basic version, and the Katinga is just this nice put together warship. Like it looks like bronze versus steel. I mean it's this Stone Age versus not Stone Age.
This is always like I've always said that there's the D7 and the Katinga is kind of like a refit of the D7, kind of like they did for the Enterprise. But this is more speaking to a refit style. Like the D4 is like the TOS Connie, and then the difference to the refit is kind of shown here. More so than with the D7, I think, because this changes between the Katinga and the D7 are so subtle. I mean, they are there. There's quite a few different differences.
Well, for the most part, it's just it's just detailing, isn't it? Hull armor and whatnot.
Yeah, there are some size differences and stuff too.
Oh,
but I don't know. That's what I see. That's what I see here. Is that the Katinga is like a refit of this, which I would buy if I was showing this in the '80s without anything else. I'd say, okay, well, there you go. That's the refit of that ship.
Yeah, so basically, we're saying if the D4 was the D7 and the Katinga was the Katinga, or even if this was the D5, whatever, and the Katinga was the D7. Anyway, next picture though is just a close up on the weapons pod on the front bit. Do you like all the different markings? Because all the other ships tend to be very simplistic, but here we've got almost war paint. Because I don't know how much function it's all going to have. What do you think?
I love that you said war paint, because I was thinking the exact same thing. The Katinga is the same way. It's got that marking around the torpedo launcher, same kind of style, and I love that. I love that aggressive warlike look. Yeah. And I think if you're an enemy, you see that staring at you, and it starts glowing red. You're like, oh my god.
Well, I mean, just in the most rough, look at either side of that middle bit. War paint. I mean, that's just literally, stylistically, that's probably what it's meant to be. And you've got these beautiful windows. I know that was the reason why it wasn't used. But just these big windows at the top, I mean, there's going to be some great views on those nice, big, long windows. Yeah, it's just nice to be able to show this to the fans, because, you know, there's about 3 images, well, we sort of showed you 2 images of this ship. And here we are with detailed, high-res images. You get to see what, you know, Koji, what the effort was put in to make this model. And they deserve all the credit they should get, because I believe this was done like 36 hours on their own back. They didn't get paid for this, and it feels so Trek. So well done, and I'm glad we get to show this to the fans, that you guys get to see an unused ship.
You're welcome. I mean, thank you.
You're welcome. Well, thank you them.
All right. Next picture is a shot from behind, which is nice because we're seeing all these shots from above and in front. It's nice to see a different view. Like I said, I love those nacelles. I love that there's something going on with the Klingon nacelles now. I mean, well, Enterprise, the way that John makes little cutouts, and even when to Renegades, how they kind of taper off and stuff. It looks fantastic to have some variation there, because we've always seen the same Klingon nacelles. So I love this.
I know they had those green glowing elements in the Katinga, so it makes sense there would be some glowing element, because again, TOS has no glows. Really, obviously the TOS colony should have had some, but it didn't. So it makes a lot of sense. I'm actually kind of getting close. Looking at the aft support struts, I kind of like how that's built. Just like that. Normally not the smaller little bits, but those big chunky. I think if they'd sticked with that bigger, rather than cabling, like structural beams, like big chunky beams, that would have been better. Rather than
totally agree with you.
Okay. Yeah.
First time for everything. I agree with you. I'm just kidding. I agree with you all the time.
Hey.
But anyway. Now it looks like there's a torpedo tube at the back of this too.
There will be a picture for that, so we'll wait on that.
Listen to me.
Cut to the next, but he hasn't seen these properly yet. we look at these fresh, apart from me who makes these ones specifically. But the next picture is the engine. Look at that detail. For a never used ship, look at that gorgeous, simple detail on the hull markings, and I don't even know what it is, but just...
That's good. So I just used that whole region talking on the last picture. One thing I see, though, that I would almost put them upside down the other way, so that the front of the nacelle was more like the refit Connie kind of angle.
Oh, sure. I
think that might look a little bit better, but that's just one little change that I would experiment with to see what it looks like.
Now, looking at this, I know... Well, it's sort of difficult because there really isn't any indications, but this structure doesn't feel like disruptors fire out of them.
Not at all.
I mean, the D7, you can't really say that either, but they do. But this just feels like just nacelle.
Yeah, exactly. The D7 does have a little knob, like a little extra plating thing that where it kind of fires disruptors out of.
Okay.
So it could be the case could be made for that. There is something that could be disrupted there. But this, yeah, no weapons at all on this that I can see. So. All right, so let's go into the next picture. Oh, here's a shot of the rear weapons tube. That ribbing that you see there on each side is very reminiscent of the Klingon communicator that we see in Star Trek 3. It's kind of got those ribs on the side, and I like that he had kind of tied that in.
Not much to say, just lots of nice detail, and yeah. Although no shuttle bay. I mean, to be fair, you could probably argue that those, maybe that top, maybe above and below the torpedo launcher, those are doors that open or move to the side, maybe, if you want to stretch that, but I think there's no shuttle bay on this ship. That'd be my guess.
It's a good question. I've got to ask John. I feel an episode coming up.
And that takes us back to the first picture, which is our last picture, which is the picture that all of you guys know, but hopefully you've now enjoyed this other look at the D4 unused concept. Closing thoughts, Stuart.
It's a shame that it's relegated to unused concept because they need to remaster all the Star Trek series, in my opinion. When they do Enterprise, they need to put this in and fix that little... Fix one fixable thing in Enterprise. Since in Enterprise are irrevocably screwing everything up. But this is fixable.
Well, who knows? That might be coming on Trekyards in the near future. Wink, wink, wink. Who knows? Wink.
Okay, then. Anyway, what are your last thoughts on this thing?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think about it as much depth as we just have done for this episode, and I think this would make sense as a D6. Not a D4. Perfect D6. In between, it evolves, whatever. And I think if they ever want to retcon, because again, it's not canon. You know, it's not, you know, whatever. If they want to then bring it in and say D6, I think they probably could.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, I mean, to be completely fair though, the D5s we saw, while we did see a general on a D5, it was never said to be the strongest ship in the Klingon fleet.
Agreed, yeah.
So maybe the first ship we meant to saw was meant to be a D6, an impressive warship, which never happened to see him again. So D5, D6, D7. I think that'd be a really interesting natural progression.
And it doesn't necessarily mean just because it's a higher number that means it's a more advanced ship. It could just be just how they number their ship constructions. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a stronger version of the last version of the ship. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, it could just be newer rather than stronger. Yeah. I mean, the first run of the D5 of the D6s might have been, you know, a simpler ship just to test out, and then the D5s with this. I mean, come on, try and test warships, you know. But anyway, yeah, great design. Thank you, John Eaves, for designing it. Thank you, Foundation, for building it. And
thank you, Samuel, for showing us new renders of it. You get to see it.
Well, thank you for those who
we all appreciate it.
You know. Anyway, that's it for this week's Trekyards Mission Briefing. Hope you guys enjoyed. Look at the D4 / maybe D6. We don't know. Let us know what you think of the ship design in the comments below. Let us know what ships you want to see. And tune in with every other show we have, because we do a lot and it's all fun. So that's it.
Exactly what he said. You know.
Yeah. This is it from Commander Cocking. See you next week. And
Captain Foley. Bye, everybody.